Well, hey, how are you doing? I'm so glad that you are here. It's been a while since I've seen you. Well, I'm so glad that you came by to join me today and visit for a little bit. Well, I am putting together a quilt. And do you want me to show you what I've got so far? I think you might enjoy seeing it. Yeah. Well, this is for my son Wesley and his new bride Sophie. And earlier this year, Sophie and I went to a little fabric store and she chose all the colors for the quilt. And this is one of 36 blocks. And this is called a log cabin quilt. And what she will do is, since there are 36 blocks, we have all of these different configurations. I think there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah, there are 18 different configurations that they can choose. And I believe that they have chosen the light and the dark. I've got to lay it out first and see if they want that for sure. I've got to lay it out and take a picture of it and make sure that that's the configuration that they want. And then what I'll do is I'll take all 36 blocks and sew them together and make the quilt top with that. And then I will take it down to Stallings, North Carolina, where there is a man who has a big old long arm quilting machine, and he will put the quilt batting, and then he'll put the bottom of the quilt together and make a sandwich. And then he'll sew all 3 of those pieces together in a pattern. And then he'll bind the edges. And then when he's finished, he will give me a call and I'll pay him and go pick it up and then present it to Wesley and Sophie. Yeah. And I made one very similar for Nate and Rachel too when they got married last year. Yeah, it's a good thing to have when you first get married, because the log cabin quilt symbolizes life. So for instance, you have the center, which represents the heart of the home, and typically you'll want to choose either yellow, red, orange, or pink, maybe just a really warm color, because that's going to symbolize the hearth or the heart of the home, the warmth of the home. And then you typically pick out 3 light colors and then 3 dark colors. And what that represents is the contrasts in life. So oftentimes the sun is shining, hopefully the sun is shining bright on your life, and so that helps you to remember all the good times. But on the other hand, life doesn't always come easy, and so you have the darks to represent the shadow or the darker things that can happen in life. So that could represent deaths or illnesses or hard times, but then the light represents marriages and births and new homes and new beginnings. So it's one of my favorite quilts to make, and actually it's the only quilt I think I've ever made. I have so many of these different quilts in this log cabin pattern that I've put together over the years. How do you make a sandwich out of a quilt? Well, I can show you. I'm just going to use a block as an example because I don't have the whole thing sewn together. But what you have to do is, first of all, you have to get some batting. And batting is spelled B-A-T-T-I-N-G. And that is typically made out of polyester or cotton or wool. And this is wool here. This is from some of our sheep. And this makes a very warm quilt if you use wool batting. And so what you do is you choose a fabric for the back of your quilt, and you can choose anything you want. You can even use a nice sheet if you have a really nice sheet that you would like to use, as long as it fits the entire width of your quilt, width and length of your quilt. But what you do is you put the back down first, then you put the batting in between, because that's going to give it warmth and it's going to give it some stabilization also. And then you put your quilt top on that, just like that. You have all of those three pieces sandwiched together. And then what you do next is you get out some needle and thread. This is if you're making it at home. And you want a good cotton thread. You don't want to buy a cheap thread. You want to pay a little bit more for a better thread. And I believe this is a Coates and Clark thread. Let's see. Yeah, this is a dual duty button and craft sewing thread, and so it's not going to break very easy, because you want something that's strong, because you want this quilt to last for years and years. And so what you do is you take your little bitty needle, see that little bitty needle there, and then you thread your thread through the eye of that needle. Let's see if I can do it without my glasses on. No, I don't think I can. Let's stick our glasses on. Do you hear that rain out there? It has been raining cats and dogs for the last couple of days. The leaves were so pretty. And then the rain is coming, and it's knocked a lot of them off the trees. But it's giving them even a prettier color, so it's so pretty to see. So I have my needle threaded, and you would get a nice length that you can work with, and then clip it off. And I don't think I have my scissors in here. We'll have to go find them. And then you tie a knot, and then you would get to work, and you would stitch all of these pieces together and stitch your sandwich together of a quilt. And it takes a long time to stitch together a quilt by hand. Have I done? Yes, I have. I did one a long time ago, and I stitched it all by hand, and it took a good long time. And I didn't give that one away. I kept that one, because you want to keep, unless someone, well, let me take that back. I was going to say, unless someone is also a quilter, you have to be careful who you give those works of art to, because they may not appreciate them as much as you would if knowing how much work goes into them. But I kept that very first one because I had so much time spent in it. But then I've made them over the years for lots of family members, and it's been so fun. My great-grandmother also made quilts, and I have many of those from her too, and so they're just a beautiful legacy to be able to pass down to your family for generations. And so it's so nice to have them. But I'm excited to put these blocks together for Wesley and Sophie, so that they can sleep under it soon, because it's getting cold outside. It's starting to get way on down in the fall. Halloween's coming up this week too, so we've got to get ready for that. Yeah, you want to make sure that when you're choosing something for the back of your quilt, that it's a good sturdy fabric. And I would probably recommend that you go to a store that sells quilting fabric exclusively, because sometimes if you if you go to stores that have less expensive fabrics, like the big box stores, the less expensive fabric also means less quality too, I've noticed over the years. And so if you're going to put that much time and effort into making a work of art like that, you want to make sure that you use the best quality fabrics that you can, so it'll last long time for your family or friends or whoever you give it to. Yes, I know. It's hard to find good fabric sometimes these days. And you know, that reminds me, this morning as I was making up my bed, I changed the sheets, and so I pulled out some sheets and some pillowcases that I've had for years and years, and I put them on my bed. And I was noticing that as I was putting them on my pillows in particular, that some of those are very, very old. You want to see them? Okay, I'll show them to you. Hang on just a minute. Let me get them. Okay, let's see if I can find, let's start in the oldest order first. And I believe it is this one. Now, let me look at my glasses right quick, because I don't think there is a date. This is, name on this says Grant's Wareite, and it says made in the USA. And I don't know if it was purchased with this embroidery on it or if someone did it later. But I bought this years ago, I'm talking 30 years ago, at an antique sale. And so I've had it for a very long time, and I've used it for a very long time. There are no holes in it. There are no wear spots. It gets softer the more I wash it, the more I use it. And it has just been a treasure piece of fabric to have. And so I believe that that's probably the oldest piece that I have. And I want to say it is from at least the 50s. So I would say that this is probably 70 years old, because it was old when I bought it. And the man told me he thought it was from the 40s or the 50s. I'm not certain about that, though. That I could be wrong. We'll have to look up that tag and see what it says, what year that came from. And then the next one I have, and this is so neat to me that I still have this. Let me see if the tag is still in here. I'm not sure. Yep, here it is. Okay, this is Monticelli. I'm going to have to get my glasses again. What did I do with those? This has a neat story to it. So where did I put that tag? Because I want to tell you about that first. Okay, this says standard pillowcase, and this is a Cannon. So this was woven on Cannon looms, probably here in North Carolina. But this is such a neat little piece of history. You know, when you go into people's houses and you look around at all of their stuff, in my case anyway, every single piece in my house I could tell you a story about. And I'm sure most of you feel that way too. You can tell somebody when you purchased it, or maybe what time of year it was, if you're sentimental like that. And that's just about everything I have in my home is that way. This is over 50, at least 53 years old. It could be older than that. When my parents had been married for about 2 years, they bought a little house down in Waverly, Tennessee. It was fully furnished. It had 3 bedrooms, and I mean down to the silverware. It was fully furnished, sheets and drawers, everything. paid $16,000 for it. So this was 1975. They paid $16,000 for a little house that was full of furniture. This sheet set was in the bedroom, and I still have so many pieces from that house that my parents bought in my house today. I have a chair, I have a dresser and a chest of drawers, and some silverware and a mixer. Just, you would not believe all the things that I still have from that home. And I asked my daddy about that shortly before he died. Why people did that, why somebody would have furnished a home like that and then sold it with everything in it like that. And he explained that the couple were older and they were from up north, and they thought that they wanted a second home. Down in Waverly, Tennessee, I don't have any idea why, because it was a little old bitty town, it still is, but they wanted a second home, but then decided they didn't, and so they wanted to sell everything as is, and then they sold it to my parents, my very young parents. My mother was 1920, she was 21, and then my daddy was 25. So they hit a gold mine. I don't think they knew that they hit such a gold mine like they did, when they bought that. But all that to say, the 53, maybe even older, year-old pillowcase, and it still doesn't have, it's not even thin, really. It's softer than it's ever been. No holes again. So that's a quality piece of fabric that has lasted years and years and years. It's lasted all through my childhood, and then my children used it when they were little, and now I'm using it again. And this is one of the last pieces that is left from that. It's just that pillowcase. Now, this one also has a fun story to go with it. Fun to me anyway, because it's part of my history. And let me see if there is a tag on this one. There is not one that I can see. Oh yeah, here, well, that's not a tag. That just might have said the sizing, but you can't see it anymore. It doesn't matter. I do know that it was woven on an American loom, because this was purchased in 1987. I still have the entire sheet set. It's a full sheet set. And I worked at a place called Magic World in Pigeon Forge when I was 14. That was my very first job. And I was so proud that I had earned money that summer. And so I went to Walmart and bought a set of sheets and a comforter for myself. And I was so proud to have bought my own things, like that at 14. I still have the comforter too. My daughter has used it for years. She'll, trade it out every so often, but she still uses it on occasion. And so again, that was 1987. Goodness, that's nearly 40 years ago now. And can you imagine? And it's funny because I have now, again, some of the things have worn out. Not these. These have stayed. I still have all the sheets, the sheet, fitted sheet, top sheet, and pillowcases that went with this. But I've bought newer things in the last few years that, after using a couple of months, holes got worn out in them, and they peeled up like little peels on the sheets and made them uncomfortable to lay on. And so I had to get rid of them. And these things have lasted and lasted. So be sure, if you can, I always recommend buying, it's something called vintage, is it, I'm going to missay the name. It's vintage new stock. That's probably not the correct term. If you go to eBay and type in vintage sheets, vintage USA made sheets. You can find sheet sets like that. The only difficulty I've found is the elastic sometimes is shot, and that's unfortunate. But if you can find some that the elastic is still intact, you're golden. You can easily fix that elastic too with some fresh elastic in a sewing machine or needle and thread. But I would encourage you to buy those sheets instead, because they will last you forever. And it's amazing how much softer they get over the years. And then the last thing I want to show you is this linen. Now this is new. I just bought this last year, and I want to tell you a cautionary tale. Do you remember those World's Greatest Sleeping Shirts that I made for my daughter, myself, and my daughters-in-law last year? There's a video about it. Well, I have discovered that it's not the world's greatest sleeping shirt. I'll tell you why. They're great. Linen is a wonderful fabric. It's wonderful. It's a natural fiber, and it is breathable, and it doesn't hold sweat. It doesn't hold odors. It's just feels so good on your skin. It's wonderful, wonderful fabric. But I've discovered it's not so good as a sleeping shirt, in my case anyway, and I'll explain. It doesn't have any stretch to it, and that makes it very durable, but it doesn't make for a very good shirt to sleep in, especially if you toss and turn a lot at night, because it binds around you and it doesn't stretch, and then you wind up getting rid of it and taking it off and finding something else to sleep in. Just a regular old t-shirt is more comfortable to me, so I hope I didn't steer any of y'all the wrong way when I said that last year. Lesson learned. Well, what are y'all doing for Halloween? Do you have any plans for Halloween? We have several different things we're doing. We went to a pumpkin patch last Saturday night. We went to a corn maze. Let me rephrase that. We went to a corn maze, which was down the road. And I was honored because my daughter planned it, and she and her boyfriend and both of our sons and their wives went, and they invited my husband and I to go, and so that was very sweet, and we had such a good time. We had so much fun. It's called Country Days Corn Maze, and it's just right down the street from here. It's not very far at all, and we had a ball. We walked around. We went in the corn maze. The girls and I did, and also one of our young friends who has a newborn baby, she went with us too, and she brought the baby. And just the girls went into the corn maze because the men didn't want to pay $10 for a ticket. So we had a lot of fun doing that. And then we raced, my son and our other friend and I raced these there was a cow, a bumblebee, and a pig, and they were on a track, and we raced, and I won. I got to the end the fastest, and I've been working out with weights, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm light as air, and I'm so strong, because I was really going fast, but I didn't realize until the end when I got off that my husband had given me a really hard push. And so that's why I was so fast, but that was fun. And then we rode this cow train, and it's for children. It's for little children. And what they've done is they've taken barrels and they made a train out of it, and they've hollowed the barrels out and put seats in them, and then they put little cow legs and a head on the train, and then there's somebody in a four-wheeler pulling you. Well, it was a bunch of adults on there, so it was me and two of my sons and some daughters-in-law, and that was it, and daughter too, and so that was it. And so my eldest son was at the front, and he kept telling the girl to go faster and faster. And my hind end did not fit into that bucket. I grew out of that thing 20 pounds ago. I was too big. So I was kind of sitting on top, perched on top of this big old barrel, and we were whipping around these cow fields. It was hilarious. Cornfields, not cow fields, in the cow train. And we had so much fun, but when we got off, every one of us were covered in dust because there was so much dust out there. And we went home and we were filthy. It was just powdered dust everywhere, but we had a good time. It was like being a little kid again. We had so much fun. You want to hear some stories about when I was a little kid on Halloween? Okay. Okay, let me think of something. Okay, I've got a good one for you. Okay, when I was about 9 years old, it was Halloween Day, and my father, it must have been a Saturday or a Sunday, because my mother always worked on the weekends, and so my father was in charge of my brother and I. And so he was always planning something fun for us to do, some sort of an adventure. We would go fishing, or I remember one Saturday we took free airplane rides out of the airport. And so we were always getting into something fun. Well, in the little town that I lived in, there was an old home, and it was built, I want to say, around the time of the Civil War. I may be wrong about that. It was called the Nolan House. And so it was abandoned. Nobody had lived there for a long time. And it was kind of neat to go up there and see it and walk around. There weren't any no trespassing signs up there, but we were obviously trespassing because we did not own it. But there weren't any signs anywhere back then. So this was 1982, and people did things back then that you wouldn't do nowadays because you'd get in trouble. But we just didn't think anything of it. I mean, I remember my grandmother taking me up there when I was little and picking daffodils out of that yard, and then we would go take them home, and we loved the smell of them. And she showed me how to put food coloring down in the water and stick them in there, and then the colors of that food coloring would come out in the petals. It was so pretty. But so anyway, lots of history with that old Nolan house. And if any of y'all are from that part of Tennessee, you probably remember. But I remember my daddy taking us, first of all, he took us to Walmart to pick out some Halloween costumes. I think we might have picked out a mask or two while we were there. And when we were in the parking lot, we got kind of spooked because we looked up in the air and there was a witch flying around in a circle around the little Walmart parking lot. And that kind of spooked us. And my daddy said it was probably a remote control witch, and it probably was, I'm sure. But I don't remember seeing anybody hanging on to a remote control. Maybe I did later. But anyway, I remember seeing that witch, and it was spooky, and it was small, but it was kind of spooky. So then we went up to the Nolan house, and we started walking around, and we were peeking in the windows, and there was an old well. And this was so dangerous because it was a big well. I mean, it was very round and very deep. And there was a big wooden cover over it. And so my daddy slid the cover off, and he dropped a rock down in there. And it took a long time before we heard that rock hit bottom. And that was spooky. So then we were totally trespassing. Now that I know this, we did not know this at the time, though. So I'm saying that with a caveat, we were trespassing. I don't think we really understood. My father may have, but we weren't. All we were doing was exploring. We were just exploring, and so we were walking around, and we found a door that was open. So we walked inside, and this home was beautiful. We took pictures that day because it was so beautiful. And there was a room with, it had what are those windows called? Bay windows. I had a bay window in one of the rooms. Had this beautiful floral wallpaper on the walls. And it was really kind of cool in there because, you know, the house was old and it was heated only by fireplaces. And it had a more modernized kitchen, and then it had bedrooms, and I remember seeing a lot of clothes on a bed and in closets, and we didn't touch those because, you know, that wasn't our stuff, and we were just kind of like peeking around, but it was fascinating to see that. And then I remember my daddy sitting us on the front porch, and he took a picture of us on the front porch, and we were kind of spooked because it was Halloween day, like I said, and the wind was blowing, and the trees and the leaves were blowing, and it was so spooky. It was so spooky to be out there. And so that was something that I really remember. And then I remember going trick-or-treating later on and getting lots of treats. As a matter of fact, y'all, I feel certain that I used this very pillowcase as my trick-or-treat bag because we didn't have those. When I was a kid, we didn't have plastic pumpkins to trick-or-treat in. We either trick-or-treated with a paper sack or a pillowcase because back then they didn't have plastic bags. They only had paper sacks. And so we would use a paper sack or a big old pillowcase because you get a lot more loot if you use a big pillowcase. And so I guarantee you I use this very same pillowcase to trick-or-treat with. And you got a lot of loot in that bag. And it's funny too because my parents, I'm sure, went with us when we were younger, but as we got a little bit older, I mean, I was 9 and my brother was 7. We trick-or-treated often just by ourselves in the neighborhood. There were lots of other little kids running around, and you know, they probably watched us from the front porch because they were also handing out candy, but parents didn't worry about things, you know, when we were young. I do remember them making us check our candy when we got home. And so we would go through the bags because there was an old it's not even real. It was made up now, they say, but I remember them saying that bad people used to put bad things in Halloween candy for kids, and so your parents would make you really check through it before you ate it. But that was all. And then I remember, let's see, what were some of my favorite candy? Let's see. I always liked the Crackle bars. Was that the name of it? Crackle? It was a chocolate bar with Rice Krispies in it. I always liked those. And I liked, oh, this was fun. I liked anytime you could get wax lips. Do they still have those? Anytime you could get wax lips or ring pops, those were always fun. It was a ring and had a big sucker on it. And a lot of people don't like these, but I do. They're called Mary Jane's, and it's kind of a peanut butter molasses type candy wrapped in wax paper. Have you ever had one of those? Those are really good. And let's see what else. I'm trying to think of some of the other things. It was always fun to get a chocolate bar, but we didn't get a lot of those. It was mostly candy, like sugar candy, that we got when we were little. That was a lot of fun too. So I love Halloween. Well, I can't wait to see you again. All right, until next time.